To understand Parole and Langue, we have to go down to the basics of language. So check this out. A phoneme is an individual sound like thaw, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense by itself. But if we add it to another phoneme, ther, which again by itself doesn't make much sense, we put it together and we get the word father. These individual phonemes only have meaning based on what comes before or what comes after them. It's when they're added together that they have meaning. This is a diachronic or a horizontal relationship between what came before and what comes after. This is called the parole. Parole is an individual speech utterance or an individual word. It doesn't mean anything by itself. It only means something in relation to the words on either side of it. So the word father. My father likes waffles. Makes sense in part. We make meaning out of this because of the way it relates to the words around it. And you can see that in the diagram here. Father is the subject, verbs, the object. We know how that grammar works. We get that. We understand it. So it helps us make sense of the word father in this sentence. And that's the parole. That's the horizontal relationship, the way it interacts with the words around it. And grammar is one of the ways that it does that. But it's not the only way we use to make meaning of this word. Because there's also a vertical relationship with the word father. For example, father brings up issues of patriarchy. We do live in a patriarchal, or at least historically a patriarchal society. There's biblical allusion with the word father. This person did not use the word daddy. So as speakers of English, we share with all other speakers of English that this says, my father likes waffles, not my daddy likes waffles. We'll talk about that in a second. It's a term of respect. We think about our individual relationships with our own fathers. This is the langue. It's French, it means tongue, and it's the language system that gives meaning to a word. Because we can't take this word out of this vertical context. We can't understand it. We can understand that it's the subject and that it verbs the object. We get that. But to fully make meaning, we also have to have this synchronic or vertical relationship to understand what's going on. So because of this, in both these sentences, the subject is verbing the object, right? But they're not the same sentence, are they? Because the vertical, the lang is different. The parole is the same in both sentences, but the lang is different. With me so far? Okay, so check this out. People took this idea of the building blocks of language and how you use two different directions to make meaning. You use what comes before and what comes after. That might be a plot kind of thing. You understand this episode in the plot by what happened before it, and what happens after it helps you make sense of what's happening here. But that's like the parole in a plot. And there's a grammar to a plot. This is the hero quest is an example of this. That this happens, and then this happens, and then we can expect this to happen, and we know how a story works because there's these sort of set events we expect. There's a grammar of storytelling. But there's also a vertical relationship in a story. So you can see that there. So for example, this is Mrs. Reed and Jane from Jane Eyre. And we understand this relationship in part because we have Jane's narration of what happens before this. And we're going to find out what happens after this, and it helps us make sense of the character of Mrs. Reed. But we also understand Mrs. Reed because of the lang, our other experiences with this type of character. For example, we talked about this in class a little bit. Most of us are familiar with the Harry Potter stories. But most of us are reading Jane Eyre for the first time. But you can't read Jane Eyre without your understanding of this type of relationship, this vertical relationship, coming back and informing how you understand Mrs. Reed. But you understand Harry Potter, the Dursleys, and their relationship in part because of your childhood stories with the evil stepmother, right, and Cinderella. So we can't take this character out of either the horizontal alignment and the plot, and also our cultural and language system alignment vertically, with which we understand types of characters. Interesting idea. This is a basic introduction to structuralism, and I look forward to the things that are coming up.